Hey everybody, in this video we're going to be talking about converting angles between degrees and radians. If you want to follow along, the links to the companion worksheet are in the description below. Also, if you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to click the subscribe button. So let's get started. Now, what we're given first is we're given an angle in degrees and we want to convert it to radians. Now, before we convert it to radians, it's often helpful to ask 180 degrees is how many rotations? Because a lot of people forget that rotations is also a way of measuring measuring an angle, because an angle is just rotation is all it is. And so if we think about it, well, in one full rotation there are 360 degrees. So that means if there's 180 degrees, that means we have 1/2 of a rotation. Now that helps us to then move on into radians, because then if we say, well, if there's half a rotation, then if there's 2 pi radians in a full rotation, then that means there have to be pi radians in 180 degrees, or half a rotation. So that gives us our answer. So looking down at number 2, we ask the same question. How do we take 45 degrees and turn that into radians? Well, first ask, how many rotations is that? Well, we can go off to the side and we can do a quick calculation and say 360 divided by 45. Well, if we cancel 9, that's going to be a 4, and that's going to leave a 5. And so that means we're left with 8. So that means we can divide 45 into 360 8 times. So that means we have 1/8 of a rotation. So then how many radians is that? Well, if there's 2 pi radians, and we ask for 1/8 of them, times 1/8, that's going to give us 1/4 pi. So that's going to be our angle measurement in radians. Now this approach works when you have angles that are common fractions of 360 degrees, like 180, like 45. But 316, this one for number 3, it gets a little more difficult. And so what we have to do is we have to sort of ask, all right, what is this thought process in numbers 1 and 2 that we used? Well, to go from 180 to a half and 45 to an 1/8, we kind of did the same thing. What we did to go from here to here and from here to here is we took these numbers and we divided them by 360 degrees. That's what we did. So 180 divided by 360 gives us a half. 45 divided by 360 gives us an 1/8, because that's just the reciprocal of what we had over here. But then what did we do going forward? What did we do to go from 1/2 to pi and 1/8 to pi over 4? We multiplied by 2 pi. That's what we did. And so if you really wanted to, you can do both of those in one step. And oftentimes when you look at converting from radians to degrees, you'll look at certain textbooks, different websites, and what they'll say is you're just going to multiply by one thing. Well, what is that one thing? Well, in this case, to go from 180 to pi, that's the same as multiplying by 2 pi divided by 360. Same thing here. For both of those, that's the same as multiplying by 2 pi divided by 360, because that does these two steps in one. So that means if we want to look down at 316 degrees, we can shorten our work a little bit by saying we'll just take 316 degrees and multiply by 2 pi over 360. Now, I'm going to use my calculator to help, but anytime I use the calculator and pi is involved, what I always tell people is cover up pi. Just assume it's not there. We'll put pi back in our answer, because pi is a non-repeating, non-terminating decimal. So the calculator's not going to make much sense of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 316 times 2 divided by 360. And so when I do that, I get a fraction of 79 over 45 pi. And that's as simplified as we can get. And so that is our angle in radians. Now on the flip side, now we're going to go the other way. Now we're going to convert from radians into degrees. And so first we can ask, well, half pi radians. Well, how many rotations is that? Well, if there's 2 pi radians in one full rotation, and if we're taking half a pi, that's 1/4 of a rotation. And so then how many degrees is that? Well, if there's 360 degrees in a full rotation, that means there have to be 90 degrees. Now let's think about this the way we did the other set of problems, where how do we go from here to here? How do we go from here to here? Well, to go from pi over 2 to 1/4, that's dividing by 2 pi. And to go from 1/4 to 90, that's multiplying by 360. So in all, to go from radians into degrees, to do it in one step, all you have to do is multiply by 360 degrees over 2 pi. And if you notice, this is just the reciprocal of what we did over on the other side. So for number 5, if we want to convert this pi over 3 radians into degrees, we just take pi over 3 times 360 degrees over 2 pi. And what ends up happening is the pi's, they just cancel away. And 360, let's see, I can cancel that with a 3, leaving 120. And I can cancel the 2 with 120, and that leaves me with an angle of 60 degrees. And so that is what pi over 3 equals. For the next one, 3 pi over 4, we do the same thing. 3 pi over 4 times 360 degrees over 2 pi. And the pi's cancel again. And so we cancel 360 and 4, leaving 90. We cancel the 2 with 90, and that leaves us with 45. And there's nothing left to cancel, but we still have to multiply 45 and the 3. So that means we have 135 degrees. Now for the last one, this often gets people because they often expect to see a pi, but there isn't one. But it is in radians. And the assumption is if there's a pi, it has to be in radians. Not so. Pi is just a number. And so this is just a number like pi. So if we want to convert this, we're just going to multiply by 360 degrees over 2 pi. Now, what won't happen is the pi won't cancel, but the 2 will. And so what we have is we have this quantity, 360 over pi degrees. And that's an exact answer. But if you want an approximate answer, then it's going to be about 114.592 degrees. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you have suggestions or problems you want to see worked out, type a comment below. To support the channel, click the Patreon link to help keep this going. Thanks so much for watching. And remember, the best way to understand something is to do it.